Today, I have the honor and the fortune to speak with Scott Huber, who many know as the guy just living on a tent on the side of the road. But he's here for much more than that. He has a message to share. So, Scott, how about we start with a little bit about you? Where are you from and what brought you to this area, to Naperville in the first place? Because I know a lot of what you're protesting has to do with Naperville.
Well, I grew up I was born in Milwaukee. I lived on the East Coast in New Jersey for a short time where my dad was assigned in the Army, and then we ended up in Joliet, and I grew up in Joliet, went to school in Joliet, and including Joliet Junior College, and the wind is a little testy here.
Yeah.
And I had a store in Lamont for a few years, and then I closed that and came to Naperville on recommendation of Don the Yellow Page Demographics, who told me this is get a phone here. This is the Fertile Crescent. So I came over here to try to expand my business, and as you see, here I am. So much for success in that. Basically, in a nutshell, the good old boys decided I didn't have a right to run a business here and use my business expertise to autonomously exist. It's my opinion, based on my experience here, that they want to control you. If they can't control you, they, in essence, make efforts to blackmail you. Okay, and manipulate you as a result.
If I may ask, what kind of business were you involved in?
Electronic service. Had a business I got back in '82 that was failing, and I was doing a turnaround on it. And it was coming up. It was a very slow and painstaking effort, but it was coming around. In addition to some saboteurs in Lamont, where I had my store, some who were connected here with Naperville, influential people. I was being sabotaged. It started at the Y, losing my application, and I think the loss was deliberate. I don't think this was coincidental. But well, this wind isn't cooperating here today.
Yeah, it's a little bit annoying.
And in any event, I had to go travel 60 miles round trip to fill out another application because it mysteriously disappeared from this humongous operation of the Naperville YMCA, you see.
Okay.
And basically it was an arrangement that they'd call me when a room became available at the YMCA hotel there. And finally one did. I grabbed it, and it was perfunctory with them. They based on the whole chronology of events, they really didn't want me there. They were just going through the motions to look like they were, good Joes, And basically what happened is there was invasions of privacy. I suspect that there were efforts to go through my files when I was out on service calls and stuff in my room. There's evidence that suggested that they were nosing around, and finally I tangoed with Tom Stowe, who was the executive director, and Tom and I had an understanding. He claimed that the hotel there was his ministry, and I told him about mine and my ministry with my electronics and helping the environment to be sustainable. And they showed him my big ad that I had in the Vermont polling book, phone book and the like. And but in spite of that, somebody was whispering in his ear, and there was more to it in the background. There were other factors involved here that has happened, domino effect all through the community, even to my eating at a restaurant.
Oh, they'll say something there when you're at a restaurant.
Yeah, people get their nose out of joint and speak to the management, and I was a marked person, you see.
Okay.
I was an undesirable, and I'll get into that more later. But in any event, I was a marked person there. There were efforts to destroy friendships I had developed there at the Y amongst the renters and the like as well, 2 senior citizens and the like. And it was sad because we had such a good rapport. But these people are so inflammatory and so divisive. They know how to press buttons and turn people against you. No matter how long or how well you've known them, it's a scary thing,
And do you think they do stuff like that, to people who aren't willing to conform, who stand up for themselves?
Well, yeah, I think it's all a conditioning thing here. They want you to fall in line. At least certain of us that they feel are a threat to their domain. Okay, because obviously there are a lot of people here that don't conform, and I don't see them being torched like I've been. Okay.
Yeah.
So obviously there's something more going on here, and it's a long story. It's very convoluted, but I'm just going to give you basically the Naperville DuPage experience. And my experience here is there's definitely been a Republican axe grinding here. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat either. I'm an independent. Okay. And I made that clear to people. But they have a one-track mind. Either you're a Republican or you're a Democrat.
Yeah. For some people, it's like there's nothing else that exists.
You can't convince these people. They're so brainwashed and so narrow in scope. It's either their way or it's no way. There are the political people, attorneys, the state's attorney's office, factions, controlling factions, and that's what has really been a problem. With, the state's attorney in of itself isn't totally evil. Neither is the judiciary or the police department here, but there are factions within them. I had a police officer approach me in the fall of 2010 over at Starbucks while I was eating there out on the patio, and he came up to me and said, Scott, we're not all against you. He says 75% of us are on your side. Well, that meant 25% weren't. And it's the 25% that has been making my life miserable, okay, in whatever group you talk about, more or less, if you extrapolate that. So, but they control. It's a cabal. The city goes to court, they want something done for them, the judges do it for them, okay? It doesn't matter what the facts are. They ignore the facts. The city makes its case based on skewed information and evidence, and they suppress anything that exonerates, okay? And this has been the fight here, you know. I'm resisting unlawful law and order. And it's a tough road to hoe when there are such powerful individuals who can make your life very miserable.
Yeah, and I feel like that's the kind of thing you have to be paying attention to even notice. You know what I mean? Otherwise, it's just going to go over your head, potentially.
Well, a lot of people just, accept it and move on, but they have resources to do so. I don't. These people were very meticulous in undermining every avenue that I could avail myself realistically. I mean, look at even my communications has been interfered with. The U.S. mail has refused to deliver mail here, even federal documents.
Wow.
Okay, court documents from DuPage. If they have, it's been very sporadic, very inconsistent, because the general attitude is I'm an unknown address, yet they were delivering to me quite regularly prior to that.
Oh, yeah.
So somebody was pulling some strings, okay? Mail's been interfered with coming to me. I couldn't get my debit cards for a long time until I got a secondary address from somebody who could help me out. My SNAP and Medicaid has been interfered with. Even when I had DuPage pads helping me out with my mail, then they became inconsistent and had apparently employee problems and couldn't handle everything, and so they took all my mail and returned it instead of dropping it here. And I think it would have been easier for them to drop it here, but all my Medicaid and SNAP was canceled, and I was left hanging with no reliable address to give them as an alternative to come here on, you know. And so, in any event, the efforts that I make to be autonomous and to pull myself up by my bootstraps has been sabotaged. Okay, if I can't get my mail, how can I get the assistance that I need? Okay, they've interfered with my phones. I've been throttled to 2G or near 2G when I was paying for 5G. You know, if I just recently changed carriers because they just were not responding, and sent them their technical support a notification of the problem, and they said they'd get back to me in 24 to 48 hours. Well, 3 days passed and nothing, so I wrote them again. Nothing for 17 days, so I wrote them again, and nothing. So I notified the customer service that I was going to port out for a different carrier, and then there were problems porting, and it's just one thing after another that seemed to interfere, and and then I have judges that say I'm too slow. Well, my goodness, if you look at the background that's going on, even he might be slow, you know.
How do you mean slow?
Well, just responsive to things.
Yeah.
And, when they had that Legionnaires debacle up at the courthouse with the air vent systems, they had to close down the whole courthouse. Did that slow down court cases and what have you? You bet it did, okay? Was that the judge's fault? No. Okay, well, in turnabout, it's not the defendant or the plaintiff's fault either. If there are circumstances beyond one's control, force majeure, if you will, um, that prevent normal response times and what have you. It's interesting to note that they were favoring attorneys who didn't give a good accounting for their delays. In fact, did not bother to show good cause for delay, and they were allowed to continue. But if I showed good cause, it was blown off, and I was slow. You see, I was not responding according to the court's timetable. My cases were too long on the calendar and what have you, and that's absolutely idiocy, because the fact is there were other cases that were far longer on the court calendar than mine. So why was I singled out? Okay. So it's this mentality, this attitude, this modus operandi that they exhibit that is totally off the wall. And I talk about a cabal and what have you. One fellow that I know used to work for a family here in Naperville, a influential family, and he wasn't happy with the way they were running their business and the like, and eventually it came that he was let go, and it was his observation that if you go along with the cabal, you go along with control groups, you can do anything you want here, and they'll cover for you. But if you cross them, like in my case, they make it up. They fabricate things and put you through the system. I've spent 130 days cumulatively in the Duke Age Hilton. Okay.
In the what?
The Duke Age Hilton.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Implied the county jail. Okay. The Duke Age Hilton has a lot of similarities to the Hanoi Hilton. Okay. Where they did a lot of things that were torturous and criminal. Okay. Well, it's happened at the DuPage Hilton, and so in any event, he fought that. He ended up losing his condo in Lyle, and he eventually got a job in Arizona with the government, as I understand it, as something of an aid to nursing aid and what have you. And he couldn't be happier. He's since disappeared, and I'm concerned about that. He's a fantastic photographer, and but this is the way it seems to go, and this is something I've been very concerned about, and that's why that phone has been the smartphone has been a godsend, because you see, their intent was to cut me off from the general public. The intent was to isolate me just within their group of people, so that whatever they said about me was gospel truth, you see. And of course, there's been a lot of lying here and fabrication and malicious allegations, what have you. Every one of the cases that I've been dragged into court for on criminal charges, which is basically amounted to disorderly conduct and criminal trespass, have been fabricated. Okay, they've been stings. They've been created. I even had a police officer come in and testify against this psychology doctor who didn't.
Against the what?
A psychology doctor a neuropsychologist who had an office at Benton in Washington, and she didn't like me out in the corner, so she fabricated stories against me to get me out of there. The judge was totally on her side. Okay, here's a multi-degreed person with a business major and psychology doctorate, and I'm sitting there with my associate degree in ornamental horticulture, and a few hours short of my bachelor in theology. Okay, and that didn't amount to a hill of beans with it, you know. And the judge was asked, could she handle that? Basically be impartial in consideration that this person's a multi-degreed person. Whatever this plaintiff did on the behalf of the state was God's truth. Okay, and even the police testifying on my behalf, saying that I didn't do what she said I did or was doing, was put down. The state basically made him look out. This sworn police officer was made out to look like a liar, and the court bought that garbage.
Yeah.
Okay. The state was making its case, and the state was making a case for not only for the doctor, but for the spirit of making me disappear. Okay. They just want me out of here. They want me to disappear. I'm an anomaly to their modus operandi, and basically my leadership in this community makes their people look badly because they've been lying about me. Okay, and when the facts come out that maybe I'm not what they say I am, of course they have to do something to sweep it under the rug. And that's what I found with these Republicans. You know, they love to cover things up, okay, and act like nothing happened, and yet the victim is there suffering. Okay, law enforcement has caught some of their own people in wrongdoing. They may punish them, but they never remunerate to the victim to heal the wound and to enable a recovery. And that isn't right, you know. The state's attorney has refused to prosecute criminal acts against me, and I was reading on that why the state might refuse to prosecute a crime, and they say it's because that the state is interested in justice. Well, that's such an irony when it's obvious that the justice was to prosecute the person who did the wrong, not the person who was wronged. And so this has been status quo here, you know. And basically they're trying to condition me just to give up and go away, okay? And I say that's not the way I understand it. This is America. Naperville's part of America. We have a constitution, we have laws, federal and state, and you're not enforcing them, you know? How can I be a responsible individual or appear to be a responsible individual when you're undermining the very mechanisms that would enable me to do that?
Now, how long have you been out here for?
Well, I've been right here for 9 years. I was up there by where Tom and Eddie's used to be. It's the cannabis shop now. And I was booted out of there illegally by the city. And upon the efforts of Johnny at Butterfield's, the floor manager, which is now Honey Jam, who was clearly prejudicial to my existence here, even coming into their restaurant. I was harassed. You know, I was not allowed to be a guest like their other guests, and the implication was I was a smelly old bum, and I was stinking up the place. Okay, and I wasn't of their caste. I didn't qualify to have the same access to their facilities. Okay.
Wow.
And I wrote a description of those events on Yelp. So if you look up Butterfields on Yelp, Butterfields Naperville on Yelp, you'll see the story. But he instigated the whole property management to have me removed from the whole shopping center. Okay, so they came to me and served me with a notice of eviction. Well, and technically, according to the law, I was on the public way. I was up on the grass like this over there. I was on the public way. In fact, the city attorney had come out, Mike DeSano, and I asked him about it, and he says, "You're good." Well, when they came with this notice, the police showed up and said, basically, move or you'll be arrested. Well, the city's good at putting you through the system, even though they're wrong, okay? And so that's the way it is here. You know, you do as you're told. To hell with the law. You do it our way, or we'll put you through the system and make your life miserable. Okay? Well, that's basically what they've done, and that's why I'm out here. That's why I lost my 50-year estate by criminal conduct. And when the police were summoned to make a determination of thefts, they failed to do that and did a search without a warrant because they were more interested in seeing if they could get contraband on me. Okay, they didn't, and time after time, this has been the protocol. They're looking for contraband, looking for anything they can get on me to just destroy my credibility and my right to have the criminals prosecuted. Each time they've come up with nothing, and yet they continue to pursue this. Okay. So there's something very wrong here, okay? When I was downtown at my protest site from the parking garage there on Chicago Avenue, I left my site for about 40 minutes for an emergency bathroom break and had my stuff all neatly sitting there. And when I came back, it was all gone. Well, a employee from one of the businesses in this strip across the street said they saw the whole thing, and the cops came, pulled up with their car, and loaded the stuff into their trunk, and took my food and threw it into the trash can. Nice panini sandwiches people gave me and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And their excuse was, well, it's abandoned, not for 40 minutes. Okay. They used every manipulation of fact, using hot button labels, which were taken out of context. Okay. When they took my property, they took over 100 floppy disks I had, which was basically a lot of recovered data I had worked on for the last 10 years at that point, and additional records and backup data. And I never saw it again. I had called them and asked them to return the property. I said, you stole it. And I said, I want it back. Well, no, I had to come up there and get it. Well, I was 2.5 miles up to the police station, and it wasn't my responsibility to be returning the property. It was their responsibility to. I never got it back, and I was never given any notice of auction or anything, okay? So it was just a zero, okay? So protocols weren't followed by the police, and honorable actions weren't implemented. And it's been like that, you know. There was only one rare incident where somebody stole my sign, and the cops got a handle on it And they took him aside and said, look, pay the guy for the damages to his sign, or you're going to go to jail, okay? Well, I got paid. That was about one of the very rare events where the police did what they should have done, But that wasn't the pattern of conduct with the Naperville Police Department. My experience with them has been con artistry and deceit, deception. These factions have been, unfortunately, the control group, the 25% of the police force. And it seems that that's the group that's been given license to focus on me. So I'm fighting that. Scripture says, resist the devil and he will flee from you. Okay, so I'm resisting the devil. Okay, and I'm laying the word of God on them. So many of these people are so religious here, and but they won't deal with the realities that are going on around them, and the repercussions for failure to do what they should be doing. That's righteous, good and righteous in the eyes of God. And it comes down to it that these people are just social, what they call social Christians. They practice the golden rule, etc., as long as it serves their purpose. And when the rubber meets the road, it doesn't matter anymore. Okay, and so I've resisted that. The YMCA was a good example. They were interfering with my mails, interfering with my ability to serve my customers on a timely basis, and as a result, timely pay them for my rent. And then they accused me of falling behind. What hypocrisy.
Yeah.
They were the causation of my problem, and among others. And then this Christian YMCA took me to court before the world, if you will, taking another Christian, and they knew I was a Christian, and of course St. Paul says that we shouldn't be doing that. When I tried to get a Christian judge, I was basically blown off, and to mitigate the situation in my defense. It turns out the judge that handled it in finality professes to be a Christian. He was fairly influential, and he blew me out of his courtroom like these other judges have basically since. It didn't matter what evidence I could bring before the court. It was pre-designed that I should not succeed. Okay. They weren't dealing with some high school punk. They were dealing with a 30-year-old man and more. And here I am, 72 now, and they still continue it. Okay. And they call me an eyesore for being here. And I've said, look, you get these guys to settle with me, fess up and cough up, and I'm gone. If you want this to be resolved, then twist some arms, It shows how fake this is, They don't care what the issues are. They just want their little piece of grass nice and green, and
right.
anything that comes in their opinion and poops on it, they're going to yell and scream and wet their pants and poop in their pants, you know.
Right. Yeah, it's like a very superficial way to approach things.
So hollow and so fake and phony, you know. If I did that, they'd walk all over me, you know. It isn't an even playing board here. So, in that case, where the Y evicted me, the circuit clerk, then Joel Kagan, who was a former chief of police of Woodridge, had the evidence I submitted, which was a letter, a business plan that I was requested to submit by the management at the Y, and did, which was blown off. I submitted it as evidence, and Kagan had made sure afterwards that the documents were removed on a paperwork reduction act. You see, I had tons of files here that I was burdening the court, you see, and they had to have them removed. The reality was it was, what, 3-4 pages, and it was all a cover-up. They just didn't want anybody that would come and investigate my cases to see the full context of what was going on here, and that the judge was in error for blowing me off because the YMCA had been in bad faith with me, okay? They had breached the contract with me rather than me with them as they were alleging, okay? But they have a unique way of turning everything around here, okay? So you're the bad guy, but it's clear that the big black grungy pod is calling the little transparent kettle black, okay? So on it's gone. Like the police officer gets jammed. When I try to appeal that case, the appellate court jams me, tells me I have to deliver all my papers up to Elgin in person. They knew I was an indigent. They knew I was out of for cash. Yet they were requiring me to make trips up to Elgin and back every time I had to file something. The rules don't support that. I had litigated in the first district appellate court. In years prior, and never had any problems filing my papers by the mail. The U.S. Post Office timestamp was considered the clerk's timestamp, okay? And but you see, these special interpretations were enforced on me, and I question whether they were enforced on anybody else, you know, at least as a majority. They just figure out these manipulations to enforce on people, to make it hard on them. If you try to resist that through counter filings, again, you've got more papers you got to go up to Elgin to file, you see. So it's a black hole, okay? You just get sucked in by the tremendous gravity until not even light escapes, okay? The only way to overpower these people is to address the Creator, who's allowed the black holes to exist and who can snuff them out too.
Yeah.
Okay. I wish you were here the other day. I had a fella here, and I went right on through these things in fairly good comprehensive formatting. Today, it's a little hard for me to pull things out, you know.
Yeah, that's okay.
But that first eviction by the Y was a bad omen. for the future, and it perpetuated itself. Next, I get thrown into jail by Catherine Cresswell, the judge who was an associate judge back in 99, 98. And she threw me into jail simply because I was late to trial, even though I had, prior to court, phoned her personal secretary to let her know that I was coming, but that I would be late due to unexpected emergencies. When I got there, 10 minutes after I arrived in the gallery, the judge had me arrested from the gallery, and I was denied the right to appear before the bench to explain my circumstances. That happened to me twice, and she didn't care. And then the second time, the first time was a day. The second time was almost 20 or almost 30 days, and she struck the court date for the trial date. Her excuse was she wanted to make sure I was there for trial, which was such a crock. I had demonstrated my good faith by notifying her secretary and delaying my case after somebody else's case, instead jockeying the cases around, was not an impossibility, okay? So she was playing hard-nosed. When I'd look at her, I'd see one of those English judges with the long gray tail, you know, and heartless, cold stoniness, you know. And then she's got an English name to go with it, so it seemed apropos that this was happening with this particular individual. But the irony is she struck the court date. I was left to believe I was going to be in jail indefinitely. My landlord sued for a forcible entry and detainer during that period. The date was set for the same date as the trial. Again, I was being jammed. I don't believe for a moment they didn't know what they were doing with those dates and what have you. But in any event, perhaps to cause me to have a heart attack, because I didn't have control of the situation, you know. But while I was there, they had a couple of what I call plants that were in there who were harassing me. And I warned them, I said, look, if you guys keep this up, and I'm going to file a complaint. Well, they kept it up, so I filed a complaint. Well, at 1 a.m. in the morning, shortly after I had filed the complaint, the sergeant calls me on the PA and tells me I have to get up and get my stuff together. I'm being moved to another pod. I says, why me? I said, I'm not the trouble here. It should be removing the other two guys. No, you got to leave. So I didn't have any choice, and I went. And about 5 minutes after I got there, I was ordered to see the state psychiatrist, who wanted to give me psychotropic drugs because I seemed agitated, you see. Wow. Okay. I was no more agitated than I am right now. And so in any event, I resisted that. They tried to serve it on me 2 or 3 more times in the pod. I resisted it. I was hypertensive that I was going to be charged by the judge with contempt, you know, because it seemed like this was all coming down from the judge, you know, and because she obviously had an axe to grind on me. The day of the original court date suddenly was reinstituted, and the judge the sheriff comes to me and tells me on the morning of that date, get your stuff together, you're going to court, you're going to trial. Whoa, no warning prior, nothing. I'm just suddenly jammed and told I have to do it now, okay? That's just the way they kept jerking me around, you know. When I had to take my physical, the sheriff refused to let me a few minutes to take a shower. Okay, yeah. They jerked me around. They were trying to set me up for bad falls, you know. Anything that could be used to manipulate a negative character witness, you know. Uh, uh, when I went to trial, being an experienced litigant, pro se, I presented my case before the jury, and ironically, the jury wanted to strike that. The jury requested the court and the state to hear the tape in chambers so they could scrutinize all the nuances of the tape. I had submitted a tape recording of the event that had happened. I arrived at 3:19 in the afternoon at this printer up in Villa Park, and who had contracted with me sports calendars to be distributed at Montecito High School in Vermont, one of my good customers, and Alvernia Manor there. And I was basically ripped off by this woman and her company, and they failed to produce the calendars within the time that they should have. It's a 3-month calendar, and they provided the calendars to me 5 days before the calendar expired. I said, I want my money back. Oh, it's a donation. I said, no, that wasn't the way we did this. I was paying for it based on your calendar. Okay. You're not getting a dime. Now listen, she called me a couple of times with profane language and what have you. Finally, she called me and said I could come up and pick it up. So I came up, and the doors are locked at 3:19 in the afternoon, with a shop full of their employees and whatever. Okay. She comes to the door with a big grin on her face and says, oh, I left my keys in my office. I'll have to go back and get them. It's odd that she didn't have them just hanging there in the door if there was nobody else. It was just employees, and it shouldn't have been any problem. But in any event, the door was locked. She used that as an excuse to go to her office, where she made a phone call to the Villa Park Police Department and alleged that I was in her facility, lie number one, and refused to leave, lie number two. She wanted me arrested. She wanted me removed. So then she comes to the door, smiling and grinning, unlocks the door and lets me in and gives me a seat to sit down in, okay? She la-di-das while she's waiting for the cops to arrive. I didn't know this at the time. But her window in the back of the shop was reflective of what was going on in the windows in front of the store. And so while we were talking, she said, oh, you're going to take me to the Attorney General. I said, well, not if you didn't handle this properly, of course. Well, as she dragged on and engaged me in conduct like, you're not getting a dime, the police finally arrived, and I saw them come across the storefront there in the reflection. I knew he was coming up behind me, and he grabbed me and yanked me out of the chair and said, you're out of here. In court, he testified that he gave me 10 seconds to leave of my own accord. He never asked me to leave. Okay. She alleged that she had told me to leave 8 times and I refused. Lies again. And again, it's one of those situations where somehow these people who accuse me of things are God's truth. And there's nothing that can undermine that, okay? No matter how much evidence. The jury was denied the hearing of those tapes in chambers, okay, by both the state and the judge. I produced a identical duplicate. I said, could they use this? The state and the court refused it.
What was the reasoning for that?
No reason, they just refused. Okay. In my opinion, they were too lazy. They wanted to move this on. They wanted to get the case over with and make the kill. And and trash me. Okay. They were too lazy to spend the time to review the identical tape to see that in fact it was identical. They just didn't want to do their homework. They didn't do the work that they should have done for me, and which was my reasonable right for redress of grievances and justice on the merits, which they love to lavish when they're talking about reviewing a case, which in my experience they don't do. The jury then, which is off the wall, hear this, the jury then found me guilty. In spite of being denied hearing all the evidence, hearing all the nuances that were critical to my exoneration, they brushed it off and found me guilty. Apparently, they just didn't want to take it up in a prolonged case. Okay, so again, I was bums rushed, not only by the state and the court, but also by the jury. Okay, this was a very critical case for me because my business existence, my survival was at stake here. Because I didn't have the time to review all the court procedures, that was my first jury case. I wasn't aware that I had to ask for the judge to overrule the verdict and in my closing statement. So I motioned up later for it, and she denied it. And in spite of the fact that I was, again, an indigent, pro se, and had to fire my public defender because he lied to me in the very beginning. Okay, I went through 3 judges in that case. First one was Ken Torlemke, who was the former public defender head, okay, who had become a judge. And if any judge should have been sympathetic and sensitive to my circumstances, he should have been. I asked him to recuse himself. He refused to recuse himself, but he took a reassignment. So I got Judge Mark Dwyer. Well, Ron Fraley, the public defender at that time, had lied to me. I said, Ron, I want this case removed from DuPage County. He says the statute of limitations for that's already exceeded. I said, no, it hasn't. He insisted. I said, it hasn't. I said, you're fired. He didn't like that, okay? So he went to Mark Dwyer and babbled to him that I was a nutcase, that I was yelling and screaming in front of him, coming within a few inches of his face, and that I needed to be evaluated by the state psychiatrist. Okay, so you see how they move on you. They attack your sanity, they attack your mental faculties when they can't have it their way.
Right.
So when the judge hit me with the notice on that, I filed a motion to quash, and I succeeded. And I never went to the state psychiatrist. And I asked the judge for a recusal, which he gave me. He didn't resist it. That's when I got Cresswell, which was really unheard of, getting 3 different judges. Usually it's 2 and that's it, okay? Because Torlemke took a reassignment, that didn't account as a recusal, so I got the 3rd judge, which wasn't necessarily too good. So in any event, um, uh, it was a bad day at Black Rock, referencing the Spencer Tracy movie. And it was a cover-up, just like at Black Rock. There wasn't a physical murder, but there was a murder, if you will. And as I say, Republicans have a way of covering things up and making it look like nothing went wrong. And so, so I got convicted of something that I didn't do. Even when I was arrested by Villa Park, I had to go up to the sergeant and go up to chain of command at the station because they wouldn't give me an I bond. I had nothing on my record. I qualified for an I bond. They were going to hit me for $100 bail, which I didn't have, which would have meant incarceration, you see. That's all they were trying to do, you know. I succeeded in getting an override on it, thankfully. But you see how this whole thing went. Just one thing after another. This shouldn't have happened. And the very fact that Cresswell had heard the tapes, she heard it at the beginning of the trial and at the end. It was played twice. Their facilities are really substandard, considering it's the holy DuPage County Courthouse that's supposed to be state of the art. Okay, they should have had an earphone system there where they put the tapes on that the court would hear and each of the jurors would hear with earphones to hear all the nuances on the tape.
Yeah.
That should have been implemented, okay, and they didn't, okay? That's how crappy their system is. And they convict a person, which basically is the very beginnings, which I should say is the more decided beginnings of my debacle as a businessman, as a resident of this community. And they did it on that flimsy, cheesy setup they had, okay? I might say also I had made an issue out of the court reporters system and the question of whether court reporter notes were being manipulated. It wasn't long after that, and I talked to a few people, that they suddenly implemented the microphone system in the courtrooms, okay, so that every word that's spoken is recorded, okay. I don't believe that my efforts have been in vain. I've at least made, I believe I've helped implement better judicature and proceedings by things like that. Yeah. Which also lessens the ability that a court reporter can be paid off and manipulated to change the transcript, okay? So you can see the graft and corruption that is potentially happening in the DuPage County Courthouse and how these judges can be manipulated. It's very scary to see this, that even the city, the police department, the state's attorney, and the judiciary can be manipulated by special interests that say, look, you do it our way or you won't have a career anymore.
Yeah.
Okay? And if you get a chance, watch the movie The Brotherhood of the Bell, starring Glenn Ford, Will Geer, Dean Yeager. It's a 1970s made-for-TV movie. It was aired on WLS-TV back in 1970. That's when I saw it for the first time, and I never forgot it. And it kind of shows what my circumstances have been. You either fall in line or it will destroy you, okay? watch what happens to Professor Patterson, okay, and how it affects other people's lives, and the like. It's very representative of what appears to be going on here in DuPage County. I coined it as Dupe-Age County and Naperville, okay, also known as Naperville, after Nineveh, from Jonah's days when he was told by God to preach against Nineveh for its evilness, okay? And I've been swallowed up by the whale of poverty, okay? And spit out, and I'm preaching against Naperville, okay? Or Dupaville, who's in DuPage County. And it's interesting how these parallels have come about, but they're very real. And what I'm looking for is the ability to get the attentions of those who can do something about it. I filed a federal lawsuit against the city after I was burned down here. You know, I was burned down here.
Yeah, I heard about that. Could you briefly talk about that?
2016, July 18th, which is coming up, the anniversary shortly. A retired Chicago police officer, a 35-year veteran, who had received a Valorous Award recommendation, who lives down the road here, who makes $80,000 a year pension, was eating at Butterfield's, and I was sitting down there by the bus sign using the free Wi-Fi that they have there, because my phones were down that day, so I needed to get through with messaging and things. So I went up there. He saw me while he was eating, and he became angry. And I'm paraphrasing what he said in his police report. So I went around the back, came in here, came up through the back behind us, and threw a flare at the back end of my tent there. The flare ignited the tent. This material is very flammable.
Yeah.
And within 10, 15 minutes, everything was gone. And about what I have right now was all gone. And I was sitting up there, and a guy comes to me. At 1:38 approximately, I had looked, or 1:30 rather, I had looked down because I had my umbrella here with me, and it was against this view. I basically, probably because the sun or the wind, I don't know which. But in any event, I had peeked around it, and everything was fine. 8 minutes later, this guy comes to me and says, runs up to me and says, "Scott, your tent's on fire." And I looked, and half of my first tent was burned. It was creamed already. So I grabbed all my stuff and went down here. And by the time we got here, half of the second tent was already creamed. Okay. Couldn't do anything about it. I looked. They tried to pull me away, and I resisted them because I knew what I was doing. I'm a former security captain with the International Security Organization. I know something a little bit about what I was doing. And but they have a knack for credentialed people to be ignored when they want to. Yet they didn't ignore doctors' credentials when she was on the stand, okay?
Yeah.
But my credentials don't count, you see. And so in any event, it creamed it. The strange thing about it is, here is an experienced cop who worked the 18th district and the 16th district. He was a detective and a sergeant. The 18th district is the Gold Coast and Cabrini area. Mob area. Okay. Interesting, isn't it? In any event, he came and pulled in behind the gas station and parked right under the video cameras from the station. What a doofus, you know?
Yeah.
Made a record of his visit, you know? And they had a camera that caught him walking all the way back here.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I was going to ask, like, how they found that out.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, he didn't make any moves until after crime, what is it, crime busters or crime crackers or whatever, you know what I'm talking about, published, which is authorized by the police department, published photos of his car with him sitting in it, okay? They were somewhat blurred, but they were still evidentiary, you know, enough to identify a car that they could tie him in on it, you know. So that Friday morning, this was a Monday, that Friday morning he went in and confessed, turned himself in. And so they got him. We prosecuted them. The state basically slapped him on the wrist and said, "You bad boy." Okay. They gave him 2 years probation. They let him plea bargain out of an arson to merely criminal damage to property. Well, it was much more than that. And I talked to the state about that. And I said, "Look, this is a hate crime and an act of terrorism." He said it didn't qualify. They had some technical interpretation on this, okay? I don't buy it, okay? But they did. And they let him off with the 2 years probation, no contact with me, and gave him a week's work program with the sheriff's department. And that's it, okay? I got $5,000 out of him for damages initially, but the state wouldn't let me get more. And he said, if you pursue it, you'll get less than half. And that wasn't legit either, you know. Basically, he was trying to scare me off. The only reason I took the $5,000 at the time is because I needed it for the purchase of the home for my Philippine friends who were getting evicted. By a slumlord, and so I secured the property. We had already bought a store that was on it. It was one of the little tiny street side stores, and that the original owner had run. But in any event, we saved having to move that store to another property, and by buying the whole property, everything was resolved. So I told him, I says, the only reason I'm accepting this, I'm accepting it under duress, and because I need the money for this emergency situation. And it was a real good deal that we got there. And I didn't want to let it go and disappoint these people either, you know, who are desperately in need. So in any event, fact is, I got about a quarter to a third of what I should have gotten out of it. In fact, much more, because I later filed a damage suit for the additional damages, which basically, for the most part, involves my hard drives and all my data that was fried. At least appears to have been fried. I haven't been able to process the drives with a data recovery company yet to determine exactly whether it's recoverable or how much is recoverable, if any at all. And I estimate it was $200,000. This is about 20 years worth of data, okay? Photography, research work, and in my case, evidence collection that I had on the city and what have you. That wasn't coincidental, in my opinion. Destruction of that property was timed. They knew I'm not a dummy. They know I take intense notes. Whoever took my, and I'll get to that in a little bit, but in any event, whoever took my computers, my databases for my storage, when that was liquidated, had access to all my customer notes, which I kept meticulous, ongoing notes on my customers. And this thing is just such a sham. It's just one thing after another that has happened. So there are those who've said that the city was paid off and that Pavolo was put up to it. Well, personally, I believe Pavolo and the boys over at Butterfields were in on it. Butterfields is a watering hole of cops. Okay, honey jam. And Pavolo's presence there was in keeping with that interpretation. So, in any event, I sensed that there was more going on there than just Pavolo. Okay. And with Johnny, the floor manager, I no doubt believe that he instigated things with Pavolo as well. And because of Pavolo's background and what have you, he believed he could do certain things without repercussion, okay? But I was, making sure that didn't happen as best as I could. But the stupidity behind with the video cameras, watching him, it just didn't make sense. There was so much that didn't make sense here. It was insulting, really, because you would have thought that these guys would have been more careful. The sloppiness of Pavolo in committing the crime, and then the sloppiness of the police department following up and seeing that, and the state were following up and seeing that I got just compensation for my losses, is so insulting. It's so unbelievable that this has gone on. But it's been par for the course with the state's attorney. I've had a number of criminal acts against me done that they just refused to prosecute, and they were legitimate. They were timely asserted. They refused to prosecute it, and I think they still should. And I personally think they can if they, knowing that wrongdoing has been involved here. So in any event, I've been in court on this property claim, and the judge has blown me out of his court, literally. He flipped the switch. It was phone in Zoom court, which has been a godsend in one sense, because I don't have to travel up there and back all the time and save that money. And same thing with the federal court. I think court hearings should be like 95% of the time done that way. I mean, there are certain times when you have to have a presence, but majority of this stuff can be done through Zoom and phone Zoom and video Zoom, So in any event, he just flipped the switch because he had an attitude towards me. I'd done nothing wrong. I had reminded him that I could appeal his decision. He didn't like that. You see, I'm supposed to be a dummy.
Yeah.
I'm not supposed to know the difference between my butt and my nose, And so they do what they want. In the doctor case, Karen Wilson, the judge, bought this whole schlock of calling the police officer a lie and taking the plaintiff witness, state's witnesses, God's answer to all life, And that doesn't make sense. I mean, any truly impartial judge would have called question to this, and it didn't happen. So many errors here, so many obvious flaws, and it's just been allowed to go on, okay? I brought issue to it. I mean, good grief, a police officer's called a liar who was on the scene, saw what was going on within 2 minutes of her 911 call. And here's an interesting kicker. She called, as I understand it, a couple times on 911. She claimed she was cowering under her desk in fear of my presence in her building. Okay,
Yeah.
that's that house office building on the corner of Benton and Washington, there, kitty corner from the old post office. Okay, it's a dentist has an orthodontist has the back section. Well, it was a general access to the building, and the door was open. She went inside. I had called to her, asked to try to mitigate the situation because she wanted me to move my site. Said that I was creating fear for her children clients. Well, first of all, parking lot was in the back. There was a walkway on the upper terrace from the back to the front door, which you get into her office building section. So how can I be down on the sidewalk below a cement wall being intimidating these children, okay? It was all an excuse, a fabrication, and a baby wants her bottle scenario, you know, where she's going to cry and poop in her pants.
Yeah.
And so in any event, she cried and pooped in her pants. And these 911 calls were responded to within 2 minutes, and this officer was there. He saw what was going on, and he saw that what she was saying and where I was in reality didn't gel. Okay. The interesting thing, as I was going to say, the real kicker here is that those tapes were secured by the state's attorney and me as evidence, and mysteriously they disappeared. Okay, those tapes would have shown, in my opinion, a nutcase hysterics. Okay, she had anticipated going through the window onto the roof outside to get away from me. I was such a threat. Okay, I never entered her office. I never entered her lobby. Or, you know, I was out in the hall. I was coming up the stairs, and I hit the second step to the top step to the second floor, and it was like there was an electric switch there. And she says, "Leave." And I hit the top step, spun around, and saw where her office door was, and went down, and I hit that second step again, and again she said, "Leave." I says, I said something to the effect I was on my way or whatever. And then so she continued to allege these things of me, you know. She completely lied. She claimed that her credentials were impeccable and that I couldn't question her veracity, and the fact that she was sitting there lying like a snake rug, you know. And this is the way it's been. In that printer case, same thing. She sat there and she was God's honest truth, you know, and they wouldn't challenge it. In my opinion, all these were hits, were setups. When I was after I had been arrested for being on the corner, after I had been, she had filed her complaint, like, I was back out there, and on the public way, legitimately protesting, and she said that, well, she wanted me out of there. And the judge gave her way, and she set an injunction on me, banning me about 2.5 blocks circumference of the area. Okay. So the judge violated federal and state law in removing me from a place where I was lawfully present in protest. Okay. The judge that moved me out of the downtown district by the parking garage, same thing. He violated federal and state law by enjoining me using a city ordinance that was created for one person, and that was me, and that's unconstitutional to create an ordinance for one person. And they tried to justify it later by getting other people out, and the like. But the fact is, they used it for one person, and at that time it was unconstitutional, and I question whether it was constitutional at all. If these people were protesting, problem is, the council had recognized me as a protester and allowed me to protest anywhere else in the city outside of the downtown district after that. But they refused to recognize me as a protester downtown district. I was a homeless bum squatting, okay? An eyesore cluttering up the pristine, quote-unquote, downtown that had trash blowing down the sidewalks from the various restaurants and the like in the area that while I was there, kept cleaned up. And that flower garden in front of the garage that I meticulously manicured while I was there. As similarly as that sign there, Adopt a Street does, Well, I had adopted that block part there, okay, as my business, helping beautify the community, okay? And I kept the weeds out and all that. For a couple of years I did that. And a lot of people were extremely pleased with my work. Well, I'm a horticulturalist. It's part of my bag, And but that wasn't good enough. You see, what my business did to help Naperville didn't count. What the distinguished ladies of Naperville do is all right, okay? But what I did wasn't acceptable. I was ordered by a police officer that if I pulled another weed, I would be arrested. Yeah. This is the congeniality, the friendliness of this community, this family friendliness of this community that they brag about and tout about, okay? But they suppress anything that they don't want people to know about, conveniently. Real manipulators.
Sounds like.
So, so in any event, I got evicted from that corner by the doctor's offices there, and I was told that I should go someplace else. Well, I went someplace else. I worked up the street there across from the Children's Museum. Of course, there were those trying to make something out of me being in the vicinity of the Children's Museum now. And even if I went in there to use the bathroom, I was escorted. And so I just stopped that scenario. When I used the bathroom at the train station, I was technically arrested for a 2-minute whiz. And because the Amtrak agent, I called him gray hairs, got his nose bent out of the joint because I was there using the facilities. I hadn't done anything wrong. It's generally a quasi-public facility. Most people, anybody can go in there and use the bathroom, but I was being denied that. And so, in any event, it just kept going. I moved up to the Starbucks there, and I was out front on the public way, and an officer intimidated me and told me, "You're going to get arrested if you don't move." Well, I was on the public way, again, violated state and federal law by requiring me or intimidating me to move. So I moved up to Burlington and Ogden here where the Discount Tires is, and Bell Tires is now. I was there in the corner, in the north end or the south end of the highway there. And, the city was trying to make a stink because I was near their power boxes, and they said, well, we're afraid you might get shocked or something, you know. And then when I was on the other side of the street, back then, the old Bob Evans, or not Bob Evans, but what was that rib house? Dave, famous Dave's used to be there, and it was been abandoned for some years, and then this outfit called Show Me moved in. It was a replica of Hooters, okay? And they didn't want this homeless man sitting on the corner of their property there, which was on the public way, degrading their facilities. Well, there were people in the community who didn't want Show Me's there anyhow, but I moved before anything happened anyhow. But eventually their adventure ended, and they closed down, and I was well gone. I had come up to street here. In that interim, I was across from the old Starbucks there, which was in the Iroquois Plaza or whatever that is there, across from where Big Lots used to be. And the city had me arrested for camping on a roadway. Well, again, the city council had already determined me to be a protester and authorized me to camp anywhere else, to not camp, but to protest anywhere else outside of the city district, the downtown district. So I did that. So I was arrested for camping on a state roadway, okay? Well, again, home rule cannot overrule state protest rights, federal protest rights.
Yeah.
I was arrested. Then eventually, basically what that did was tied me up. They hit me with a bunch of code enforcement violations prior to that, dragged me into court, and basically it was a diversionary to sap me off and overload me while I was preparing my appeal in the doctor case. Okay. I had been informed by the public defender that the state public defender would handle it. The state public defender said that my case isn't criminal enough for them to handle it, okay? So I had to handle it. So I proceeded. And suddenly the state defender would have been allowed 6 months to prepare for the case. I was told when I entered my appearance that I had 30 days. So I was getting jammed right off the bat. And I had to fight to get it expanded, and I got it expanded, but then this arrest came. They threw me into jail. Basically, I got distracted doing all this stuff on timetables. And I realized on the day that I was supposed to be in court, to have a motion heard, hear my motion. This wasn't a court order. This was my motion. The judge, I was late. I didn't get there till the afternoon. The courts were locked up. My probation officer went with me and couldn't get anywhere. Everything was locked up. So I found out that a couple of warrants were sworn out by Judge Minton on me, and I was surprised that Minton did that to me. But in any event, she struck me in my prior observations to be an even-handed judge. When she did that, threw me into jail for 70 days. At the end of the 70 days, the state's attorney admitted before the judge in the final hearing that they were going to nully prosecute the charges because they would be too embarrassed to bring the charges before the judge. Okay. These are the ironies that I've been dealing with, you know. Was I reimbursed for it? No. The judge the state had also was prosecuting me for a violation of my probation, saying that I had contact with the doctor, Dr. Borchardt, and on the Naperville patch. Well, all I had done is address the writer of the article about the what had happened and explained some of the things, elaborated on some of his accounts and what have you. And if Borchardt was there, I didn't know it. If she was there under a false name, I wouldn't know it, So they had no grounds for saying I had contact with her. Even if I would have talked to her, unknowing it was her, they had no grounds, She would have had to announce who she was, But it didn't happen. But Judge Diamond found me guilty anyhow, sentenced me to 30 days and subtracted the 30 days from the 70, okay? That was supposed to make everything good. But he then closed out the whole case, which meant the additional 9 months or so of probation was wiped out, and I wouldn't have to be under the scrutiny that if I did anything wrong, they could complicate matters and arrest me again, and then really lay it on me, So I let it go, and instead of appealing it. Actually, I couldn't. I didn't really have the facilities at that point. It was wiser to let it go at that point and save a lot of potential problems that could have been availed by my, opponents. In any event, on my way out, I'll interject something here. From the first time I was in jail with the Cresswell case, the Penny Dorda case, State versus Huber. After the trial, I went back to the pod. And this was an interesting turn of events. I went back to the pod, and what happened in the courtroom must have gone around the jail like wildfire. Because when I went in and got my stuff to leave, the whole pod, quote unquote, the whole pod, rose to their feet and applauded me. Wow. Yeah. And I left. And but this time I left, and it wasn't too much ado. But when I got my property out of properties, which had, among other things, my 2 computers, I found that my main computer's screen was smashed. It looked like they took a billy club and wrapped it. And the other one was cracked. And that wasn't the way I left them when they took it. When I tried to obtain compensation for it, they blew me off. Sheriff. So I was disabled without sufficient funds to be able to appeal anything anyhow. It's just, one domino after another here. And so I ended up out there by the former, Dominetti's. And that's where they ordered me off of there illegally. Leave or you're arrested. It was the same officer who framed me down at Red Mango after the complaint was filed, and arrest was effected by the doctor on her corner. At the Red Mango, where I had very good rapport with the manager. In fact, was invited to come and use their Wi-Fi anytime. Didn't have to buy anything. I was just allowed to come and use it if I wanted to. And couple of nights I was in there were some kids that were on duty, and a couple of gals and a boyfriend, one of the gals. And the first time I'm sitting there, coming up on closing, and still eating and working on my computer, and they take a dirty floor mat that they rolled up and throw it on the end of my table. Well, I didn't say anything. I just wrapped it up and left. And the second time happened, and they did it again, and so I took issue with it. I said, look, that's not proper conduct. I said, I want your boss's phone number. Well, they called I went into the restroom, and then and then got ready to go, as I usually would right before closing, and I was leaving at 11, which was their closing time. Naperville's had a policy that they don't consider criminal trespass until 11:15, 15 minutes after closing, okay? I was leaving between 11 and 11:01, and the cops barreled in and prevented me from leaving. And David Pastrick, the officer, framed me and got the kids to accuse me of using foul language, disorderly conduct, and criminal trespass. And Ed Christensen was in on that, and I was arrested. And basically what was going on there with the police is they were trying to complicate my arrest with the Borchardt case, you see, and compound everything, okay? So you see there was a method to their madness. And basically I was railroaded on that. Judge Ferguson, my public defender, Chris Holland, who happens to be the city prosecutor in my case here right now, to get me off the sidewalk, claiming I'm an obstruction to the view of vehicles leaving the exit here, which is a crock, and everybody knows it. It was more of an obstruction to the view of people exiting here. You see where he is? And he's well before the gutter there. And now he's making the decision to move out, okay? Most of them now, with the trees down the road, which are more of an obstruction, than my tent is. My tent is not an obstruction. Those trees are. So since they've leafed out, people have to come up to about where the grass and the curve start on the far side there, okay? So you sit there similar to this guy, okay? So the car isn't out in the street. It's before the street. It hasn't entered the intersection there technically, okay? So earlier this spring, around April, they usually came up, and where the blacktop and the concrete meet, they would make their decision to move out, okay? Not down there, but up here, okay? Because they could see the trees weren't obstructing because they weren't leafed out, okay? And that's my whole point. The cop testified that when he came up, his car was out into the intersection in order to see down the road, okay? I said, you must have been driving a Rolls Royce. I was referring to the 12-cylinder models, you know, and Bentleys, you know. That's the only way his car could have been out in the front legitimately, unless he was just overplaying his cards, you know, and doing that on purpose and saying that was the case. The fact is, they could be back on the blacktop and have a clear vision to safely exit the apron here. So you can see how they operate. Came out, took pictures that were clearly skewed to characterize my facility as something that it wasn't. and the judge bought it, blew off all my photos that I had shown that shows otherwise, and fined me for $100. But I filed a motion to vacate and to bring in new evidence, and I've asked to have it. I've motioned it up for October 4th, I believe it is, so that I have enough time to get everything together and make my presentation, and also to and that's the date that they set for me to pay my fine. Okay, so I intend to go to it with them then, with my additional evidence, and so that stayed the order. And if they're following the rules, they can't do anything to me until then, until after that date. The city could conceivably call it up sooner, but I would resist it, and I'd have grounds for production of evidence, and what have you. But my health and what have you, I've been suffering from severe fatigue, and it hits me and just drags me down. Can't keep my eyes open, much less do research or, read anything, whatever. But you see how this just snowballs, and how for some reason these people, this cabal, this club, no matter what they do, is sinless. That nothing can be brought against them to show otherwise.
Yeah.
Because they'll just destroy it. They will ignore it. They will act like it doesn't exist. And I'm the bad boy on the block, you see, which is such a crock. It shows how psychotic these people are and what liars and deceivers they are. And these people claim to be so religious, so Christian. Okay. So I've challenged them in Christian spirit, in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and through Christ's shed blood on Calvary, unto righteousness. I did that when Chief Dave Dial brought the eviction notice when I was downtown. Him and Pastrick were in the car, and two other officers. And I let them all know that I was challenging them spiritually. They went ahead with the lie. Dave Dial happens to be a member of Compass Church, or was. I don't know what his status is now. I don't know if he's even alive. I don't know. Lord may have taken him out. But in any event, I've challenged the city on my Facebook. I've challenged a number of officers. I've also warned them that Matthew 18 says, if you hurt any of my little ones, you place worse than a millstone about your neck, thrown into the sea and drowned. And that's by their own doing that they initiate that act, that punishment of God. So they have control over that. If they want to avoid that, they know what to do. Scripture also says, that was Matthew 18, 5 to 7 and 10. 1 Corinthians 6, 9 and 10 says, wrongdoers will not see the kingdom of heaven, or the kingdom of God. And certainly hurting Christ's little ones is wrongdoing, his believers. So they have millstones about their neck. The courthouse has millstones about their neck. In that case where Chris Allen handled my case of the public defender in the Red Mango frame-up, he told me at the day of the first hearing that they wanted to put me in jail that day. And so he gave me an option to plea bargain, and then they'd set the gate for trial. And he says I had 30 days to revoke that if I chose to. Well, I wasn't in no case ready to be incarcerated that day. I had stuff sitting out here and what have you, which would have been vulnerable to theft and what have you. So I plea bargained the criminal trespass for disorderly conduct, you see. And prior to the 30 days, I withdrew the plea. When I went before the judge, he refused to allow me to withdraw the plea. So they found me guilty on disorderly conduct. And they hadn't proven that I did, other than apparently the state's evidence from the witnesses that it, falsified the facts. Anybody that knows me, I'm not prone to use foul language.
Mm-hmm.
And these are the ironies that are so obvious, and yet it goes down the other way, so I'm resisting unlawful law and order.
How long do you anticipate being out here?
I have no idea. As sadly Stevenson said to the Soviet ambassador back in the days of the Cold War, he told, I think it was the Cuban Missile Crisis, he said, he was asking about nuclear weaponry and the like, and he said, Mr. Soviet so-and-so, I can wait until hell freezes over. Okay?
Yeah.
And that's kind of the way I feel about it. Lord willing, I'll have the health, and I pray daily for rehabilitative, energy, so that I can follow up on my promises, on my commitment. But interestingly, this family in the Philippines has been a motivator, an energizer, something that's also given me an appeal to the public too, because I'm helping other people, and they feel it's really amazing. Here, this person is in such a deprived situation himself, and he's helping somebody else.
Yeah.
Well, these people were dying, and I read the mail, and I wasn't going to let that happen if I could help it with the Lord's help. And I have to give the praise and the glory to the Lord, because He brought people here that enabled me to help them.
You mean like donors, people helping you?
Cash. He's helped me get around these roadblocks to my email or my wiring money. I've been blocked by Western Union and on technicalities and lies. I've been blocking money from her. They've lied to me. I'm held to the nth. These people know who I am, and yet they require a state ID. I just had an episode at Walgreens where a gal knows me. I paid her. I was given permission by a supporter of mine to use his account to send it, because it seemed like money coming from my account was being blocked. So we're getting around it, but in any event, I sent the money and they blocked it to her. And it was critical money for her aunt who needed medicine urgently because she had had a stroke. And they wouldn't move heaven and earth to give an exception under the emergency situation. They just refused. They had refunded it. So I went down there a week later, roughly, to get a refund, and that same clerk, who is one of the night managers, they got a fancy name for it.
Yeah.
And she refused to give me the money, even though she knew I gave her the money on it without having any ID. But in this case, because I was using my supporters account, I had to get his ID and him in there to receive the money that I had given her. That's the hoops they put me through.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah. So the money is still sitting there almost half a month or so now. And I'm waiting on my supporter to be able to go in there and get the money himself and just end that. I told her, I said, even when I tried to even inquire about how long the request for the refund would be in the database there, and she said, well, I need a phone number. When I was going to give her the phone number, she blew me off, and I never even be able to find out how long it would be there, so that he could avoid entering all that data into the kiosk and just go up with a license and claim the money. Okay. No, he had to come in and fill it all out all over again and what have you and so on. Okay. And I just told her, I said, you've blown it as far as PR. And I told her before I left, that was on the phone afterwards. And before I left, I told her, I said, look, you've lost a customer. It was quite obvious who I was. It was a refund. I wasn't receiving money from somebody else. I think that's a distinction that should have made exceptions. And I'd been going there since 2017 at least, so they knew who I was. I had made arrangements with other night managers, if you will call them, and they understood. In fact, the guy was there, and he gave her notice that I was allowed to use his account to act as his agent. And strangely, this one gal there steps up and he said, because I claimed power of attorney, and she says, well, you need to have court papers for power of attorney. I said, I don't understand it that way. Okay. My understanding is power of attorney is anybody that's given agency to act on behalf of somebody. And the very fact that I had him personally in there to verify that should have been sufficient, should have been put on the file, and I shouldn't have had to go through what I went through the other day. But these are the roadblocks to almost anything I do. I'm put through extra hoops and held to the nth with no exceptions, even when common sense dictates, And so I don't argue with them anymore. I just let them have their way. And when, Lord willing, when I get my settlement from the county and the city and the state, I'll just exit and go to the Philippines and help these families, these needy families. People around here think they're needy, and they have no idea.
Yeah,
I mean, even the homeless think they're needy here. You go to the Philippines, and it's the difference between the homeless here and the well-to-do is the same as between the homeless here and the people of the common people of the Philippines.
It's kind of like a whole other level of poverty.
There's no jobs. They just recently started billing for water, and water was provided to everybody on the island for free. It was the whole system was put in by the Queen Elizabeth of England years ago, and the services were offered free. Apparently, when the Queen died, that died, and now they're just operating like a regular water company, and they have to pay for the water, and that's really created a lot of problems for everybody there who don't have the money. It's just been one thing after another with them, and then they've got these typhoons. They're in Typhoon Alley there, and they're amazing people because they're so resilient. They might get mowed down and they pop up like dandelions,
Yeah.
And I can empathize with that kind of a situation, how Murphy's Law just happens so much. And that's their variety, and I have my variety here, So I resist unlawful law and order, and I try to kick the devil's butt there in the Philippines by helping out and preventing people from dying and hurting, as best I can. And for some reason, that door was open to me, and the Lord sent this young lady to me. She didn't beg or anything. I just read the mail over a period of time that they were in desperate shape and started helping, And so I bought my house down in the Philippines, and I'm not homeless.
Yeah.
Anything else? I'm sure I can elaborate on more, but that gives you a good slice of.
Yeah, I think that's quite a bit to work with. And again, I appreciate your time, Scott.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all right. I appreciate it.
Yeah.